If you have already walked one of the Camino routes, you may have discovered that coming home after the Camino is the hardest part of the entire Camino experience. Hi, this is Nancy, and I've been there, and not just once or twice. Every time I have come home from the Camino over the past 20 years, I've been faced with what seemed like a monumental, insurmountable challenge, adjusting to life off the Camino and somehow keeping the spirit of the Camino alive in my life. Maybe that's why I've gone back so many times. But not everyone gets home and immediately starts planning their next Camino. We have to talk about this. We focus so much attention on getting ready for the Camino, and then you spend your time on the trail deeply immersed in the experience. Now we have to attend to the after part. We have to gather some tools and resources for pilgrims returning home from the Camino so we can round out the Camino experience. In this bonus episode and the next 4, we are going to look at how to bring home the Camino experience. Specifically, we are going to explore what you are up against or what you have been up against since returning home. And then I'm going to share with you some ideas for how to take on one of the biggest challenges pilgrims face when they come home, how to find and understand the lessons of the Camino. Now, full disclosure, we won't get much farther than the tip of the iceberg in these 5 episodes. That's because bringing the Camino home takes time and attention, possibly even more time than you put into getting ready for your pilgrimage. But what you can expect is some immediate relief from those unsettling feelings you've had since you returned home. How will that happen? The number one secret to bringing the Camino home is to share the experience with other pilgrims. So in these next few episodes, I'm going to share with you some of the conversations we've been having inside our new pilgrim community, La Terraza. You will see that you are not alone on this path. Now, if you have not yet walked one of the Camino routes, these next episodes may not be all that useful to you right now. So you may want to bookmark them so you can come back to them after your walk. But what I do want you to know is that when you return home from the Camino, whenever that is, you will find the connection and support you need in the La Terraza community. Let's jump right in and look first at how returning home fits into the overall Camino experience. One way to look at the Camino experience is to notice that it is a series of stages or phases. You heard the call to walk the Camino and you said yes, which some would say is the moment your pilgrimage began. It was a poignant moment, wasn't it, when you realized you were going to take the big, bold step to walk the Camino. And then you started to do some research, and you discovered there's more to getting ready for this than first meets the eye. But you did it. You packed and prepared, left home, and got yourself to your starting point. Then you walked, and it went the way it went, and then you came home or continued traveling for a bit. You moved from one phase to the next, as required, as you counted down to your departure date, took your first steps, and then arrived in Santiago. What was that like, walking into Santiago? For some people, arriving in Santiago calls for a big celebration. It represents the end of a massive accomplishment. It is the terminus of a dream come true. Or it signals the end of one glorious phase and the start of another. For other people, their arrival in Santiago feels like a big letdown. After so much effort, this is it? Where is the transformation everyone promised? When is the parade in my honor? Or maybe your timing was such that you walked into Santiago alone because all your pilgrim friends were either ahead of you or behind you. And many pilgrims never reach Santiago, either by choice or because of an unexpected plot twist. So when and where exactly is the end of the pilgrimage for those people? What was the end of your Camino like? Was it what you dreamed of, expected, hoped for? Were you celebrating or grieving in Santiago, or both? There is no one-size-fits-all Camino experience. There is only your Camino experience. And often when pilgrims reach Santiago, they think the Camino is over. But that idea can really trip you up. Let me say that again in a different way. Believing and acting as if the Camino ends in Santiago can set you up for a big, unsettling surprise when you get home. Because here's the problem. We haven't been paying close enough attention to the after part of the pilgrimage. We spent weeks and months getting ready and then walking, but then where did everyone go after that celebratory photo in front of the cathedral in Santiago? What did they do next? It's like the music stopped and there are no chairs to sit in. Hopefully you were able to get your Compostela, enjoy the city of Santiago, attend a pilgrim's mass, see the Botafumeiro swing, have some good tapas, collect your Camino souvenirs, and spend some time at Pilgrim House processing the experience. Or maybe you topped off the walk by continuing on to Fistera or Muxía. But then what? You just spent weeks as a pilgrim, embodying that identity, moving at the pace of walking, having conversations of surprising depth, and blasting your heart and mind and spirit wide open. And then, the moment you leave the center of Santiago, who are you? Are you still a pilgrim? Of course you are, because once the pilgrim identity seeps in through your senses, you are always a pilgrim. But I'll tell you, I've stood on the platform of the Santiago train station, waiting to go to Madrid, and have wondered, who am I now that I am no longer on the Camino? And I've seen many other pilgrims on that platform over the years who seem to be wrestling with the same question. Here's the big elephant in the room. Life goes on after the Camino, but the you who re-enters that life back home is not the same person who left it to go walk the Camino. So who are you? You are someone who has discovered that walking the Camino was about so much more than your boots and backpack. It was about more than flights and trains, buses and taxis. It was even about so much more than walking across a country and sharing meals with people from all over the world. What was it really about then? It was about you. It was about whatever you got out of the experience. Remember that question people kept asking you before and during your pilgrimage? Why are you walking the Camino? That's what the Camino was really about. You discovering your true motivations and allowing them into your life. What comes next is about you having that, your reasons for walking, alive in your daily life, off the trail, and bringing these reasons into life with your family, circles of friends, and communities back home. But sadly, for most people, that doesn't just happen. That's why I created La Terraza. Let's spend some time looking at what happens when you return home from the Camino. A few moments ago, I said that the Camino experience is a series of phases. And what we know about phases is that there is a transition time when you move from one phase to the next. At no time is that truer than when you are at the end of your walk and returning home. Even arriving into Santiago is a transition. Immediately, your schedule changed. You didn't have to be up out of bed and out the door of the albergue by a certain time. And you no longer spent hours a day walking. Suddenly, you had way too many choices for where to eat, get a café con leche, and shop for supplies. And while the final stages into Santiago were likely busier than other parts of the trail, nothing prepared you for the busy energy of the historic city center. it can all be a bit much. Even if you got caught up in the celebratory mood or were joyfully reunited with pilgrim friends you hadn't seen for a while on the trail. Your next transition was leaving Santiago to go to the train station or airport. Well, now, that was a change of pace, wasn't it? And from Santiago, you probably had to transit through a large European city and its airport. So again, not the Camino. Add to it that heading home comes with an onslaught of logistical tasks, rigid timetables, and a lot of noise. And you may have found yourself feeling a bit off balance. Arriving home likely brought a whole new set of changes and challenges. Were you happy to return home? Or were you sad that you were no longer immersed in the daily pilgrim life? Some pilgrims feel this loss deeply and struggle to feel at home back in what we typically call real life. How do we grieve something that's not a person or other entity? I bet you got some questions when you first arrived home. How was your vacation? Did you have a good time? How was it? How the heck do you answer these questions about something like a pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago? Because you and I know, not only was this not a vacation, it wasn't like any other trip you have ever taken. If you could choose only one word to describe your Camino experience, what would it be? After the initial shock of landing back home, we then had to adjust back into our old routines and set up new ones. That's when it got really interesting. This real life thing, it may have felt like it no longer fit. You may have felt lost without your pilgrim routine. You may have discovered you hate the job you left behind when you went to walk the Camino, or that a significant relationship no longer served you. You may have been missing Spain and the now familiar practice of taking your time with a coffee while sitting on the terrace of a Spanish bar chatting with friends. You may be longing for the simplicity of life as a pilgrim, or the simplicity of owning only what you need and traveling light. And then there were the people, the pilgrims who you met along the way with whom you shared this incredible experience. Before the Camino, had you ever had the intoxicating experience of making lifelong friends in an instant? Where are those friends now? They may be only a WhatsApp message away now, but that's just not the same. Let's sit with all of this for a moment. The transition home may just be the hardest part of walking the Camino, if only because the differences between life on the trail and life at home are so stark. We can give it a name. The post-Camino blues are a very real thing. And curiously, it doesn't matter how your pilgrimage went. If it went well, you get the blues. If it went badly, or if it was harder than you expected, or if you got injured or sick, you get the post-Camino blues. So there are things we have to talk about, things you have to work through. And once you do, then you can move on to the real work of the pilgrimage, bringing its significance deeply into your everyday life, telling your Camino stories to people who want to hear them, and going after what's next in your life, whether that is another Camino or writing a book, or starting a business or downsizing your home, traveling more or for longer, or launching a community project to transform your neighborhood. In short, what's next is keeping the spirit of the Camino alive in your daily life, however that looks for you. It's infusing your life with what I call Camino-grade experiences. It's making sure the reason you walked the Camino in the first place has its rightful place in your life, and it's nurturing the transformation that started on the trail. How do we do that? Well, that's what we're here for. That's why I created La Terraza, because we have two main challenges. One, No one really knows how to bring this experience home unless they've done it successfully themselves. And 2, while it may look like this is an inside job, meaning you have to do it all yourself, the best way to bring the Camino home is the same way you walked it, in community with other pilgrims. What you will find in La Terraza is everything I have learned about life after the Camino, from 20 years of returning home from pilgrimage. Plus, you will find other pilgrims who are walking this path and are eager to share it with you. They want to hear your stories, and they want you to hear theirs. They, like you, want to get the most out of their Camino experience and to keep the spirit and magic of the trail alive wherever they are. They want their pilgrimage to have mattered and made sustainable differences in their lives. Maybe you feel the same? We are having some wonderful, engaging, and uplifting conversations in La Terraza. We are learning from each other as we explore the lessons and messages of our individual and collective Camino experiences. And the more people who join us, the richer the conversation gets. Over the next week, I want to give you a real taste of what's going on in La Terraza. That's why I'm going to share with you what we are doing right now in the community. We are in the middle of our first community challenge. Do you know what a challenge is in this context? A challenge is a focused, themed experience we take on together over a preset amount of time. The challenge is designed to spark reflection, connection, and growth, and it's powerful because we share the journey as fellow pilgrims. What that means is that each week during the challenge, I share a short audio session that covers something related to our theme. And then each day throughout the week, I share a question that prompts discussion among the community members. I'm going to share this content with you over the next 5 sessions. Between the audio sessions and the prompts, we are having some wonderful conversations, all around finding and discovering the lessons of the Camino. If you'd like to get the most out of this challenge, you may want to adjust your schedule so you can spend some time with it over the next week, just like we are doing in La Terraza over the entire month of August. You could incorporate it into your walking schedule or set aside time for journaling and quiet reflection. This is important work, and I would love for you to get the most out of it. In a few moments, I'm going to share the audio session from week 1, and then in 2 days, you'll get the audio session from week 2. I will also share some of the conversations we've been having, all anonymously, of course. And then, at the end of this abbreviated challenge, I'm going to invite you to join us in La Terraza. Whether you accept that invitation or not, I hope you will embrace this opportunity to discover and explore some of the lessons of your Camino experience. And last thing, before we get to the first audio session of the challenge, if you would like to get a fuller picture of the challenge, you may want to sign up to receive the questions and prompts everyone in La Terraza has access to. The only way to get those is to join my email list by going to thecaminoexperience.com/challenge. That link is also in the show notes. And let me also say, you can unsubscribe from that email list anytime you like, if all you're interested in is the challenge and you don't want to stay in touch to hear about the content I share with the Pilgrim community. Okay, that's the prelude. Now let's get to the challenge. In La Terraza, the challenge is taking place throughout the entire month of August. You will be getting the abbreviated version in 5 podcast episodes over the next week. Now remember, our goal with this challenge is to find and understand the lessons of our individual pilgrimages. So let me give you a preview of the topics for each session. The topic for this episode, which is week 1 in La Terraza, is finding the lessons in our boldness and bravery. Then session or week 2 will be on uncovering the lessons found through belonging and connection. Session or week 3 is about loss and letting go, and the rich lessons found there. And then we will wrap up with the final session, or the final week of La Terraza, talking about surprise and serendipity. Are you ready to jump into our first topic, boldness and bravery? Let's do it. Hello, and welcome to week 1 of our August challenge, Mining the Lessons of the Camino. Over the next 4 weeks, we are going to explore what the Camino taught us, what lessons we learned, and where they came from. What moments spoke the loudest or shook us to our core, or whispered some timeless wisdom into our hearts. We are also going to look back into our lives, to the time before we walked the Camino, to discover the roots of our courage. Week 1 of our challenge is about boldness and bravery. We will explore the difference between the two and snoop around in your Camino experience to find evidence of both. For week 2 of our challenge, we turn our focus to belonging and connection. Then for week 3, we will spend some time with loss and letting go, both essential Camino experiences. And finally, for week 4, we will lighten things up a bit by talking about surprise and serendipity, those magical moments that are still stuck in your heart and in your mind. Our goal is to reconnect with the spirit of the Camino by looking deeper into our lives. Each week, we'll explore memories that have shaped us, whether they happened years ago or just yesterday, on the Camino or off. To dive right into week 1, let's look at the difference between boldness and bravery, and how both may have played out on the Camino. Boldness is the power behind the purpose. You felt the call to walk the Camino and then said yes. That's the moment of boldness. Maybe you weren't quite sure why you said yes, but you did. You booked your flights, and when the day came, you actually got on the plane. Getting on the plane was when bravery kicked in. Bravery is resilience. It's following through on your big, bold goal. Bravery is when you kept walking, when everything hurt, when you were nervous or scared, or exhausted, or filled with doubt. Boldness is loud. It announces to the world that you are going on a pilgrimage, all caps. It's giddily talking about the upcoming adventure, sharing YouTube videos with your friends and family, riffing with the salesperson at the sporting goods store about boots and backpacks, and sharing your plans on social media. Boldness is exciting and enthusiastic. Bravery is quiet. Bravery is found in those quiet moments when you realize that you are about to head out into the unknown. And it's not just that maybe you've never traveled to France, Spain, or Portugal. It's that you've never taken your heart, mind, and spirit on a long, slow walk that likely will have you looking deeply within at thoughts and feelings you've previously only suspected were there. It's realizing that your life is about to change. Bravery is empowering and subtle. Boldness breaks up the routine and disrupts your normal life. Bravery creates meaning and helps you discover why that disruption matters. Bravery shows up when you are faced with a difficult or challenging situation, when you have to trust a stranger or sleep in a shared dorm when you don't know anyone. Bravery shows up when the situation calls for it. It's what you do in the face of fear. Were you afraid to board your flight to Europe? Were you afraid to talk to other pilgrims? Were you nervous about those first few steps? The important point is that you did it. Here's the hidden gem in all of this. You were bold. You said yes to walking the Camino, and you booked your flights and got yourself to your starting point. You were able to do that because at some point, months or years ago, somewhere in your life, you were brave in other situations that were completely unrelated to the Camino. You were brave then, and that built courage. And then that courage enabled you to be bold. bold enough to say yes to walking the Camino. The Camino brings out our brave selves, and as we take each step, that bravery converts into courage. And in that courage, we find power and confidence that we can use for the rest of our lives. But let's back up a bit. Let's go back to the courage you already had that enabled you to be bold enough to put the Camino on the calendar and book your flights to Europe. Take some time today to think about when in your life you've been brave. When you said yes to something hard or no to something that didn't serve you. It might have been something small, like speaking up in class, asking someone for help, leaving a bad situation. Or it might have been something big, like moving to a new city, ending a relationship, or trying something no one thought you could do. In those circumstances, did you see yourself as brave, courageous, reckless, impetuous, impulsive? What words would you use to describe what it took to make that brave move? Remember, bravery isn't loud. It steps in quietly, and often no one sees it but you. No one knows what it's taking for you to step out. You may appear bold, but you probably don't feel bold. That's because you are being brave. Now, let's think of a time on the Camino when you were brave. Where were you, and what were you doing? Who was with you? Was it a moment of physical challenge when you thought you couldn't take another step? Or was it a time of deep emotional struggle when you felt alone or scared? Or were you called by a whisper to take a step of faith and trust God or some greater force to carry you through? Do you have something in mind? Now, gently ask yourself, what did that moment of bravery awaken in me? What part of me showed up that I may have forgotten? This is where the lesson is. This is where you find your connection point to the courageous you who you met or re-met on the Camino. And this is where the magic of the Camino experience lives, in the lessons you brought home with you, and in the lessons that are still unfolding. The lessons are the threads that connect you to the person you were on the trail. For this first week of the Mining the Lessons of the Camino Challenge, I invite you to share a story, a memory of a time you were bold or brave, not to impress anyone, but to honor the memory. It can be of something on the Camino or something from earlier in your life, and you can share it in the feed for the challenge, or you can just write it for yourself. End it, if you like, with a simple reflection. What this moment taught me is ... Together, we'll keep the magic alive by remembering who we've always been.